Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 27th part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who stuck around during my time away recently. Let's take that positive energy and shoot for the stars, eh? Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 54, Once Upon a Dream. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Monday. Tuya sat down on the rooftop, his feet dangling over the side of the building. He looked down, the sheer drop was dizzying. He briefly considered just sliding off the side of the building, letting himself fall to the asphalt. He'd splatter like a rotten tomato. But if he did that, who was going to finish his work? Who'd keep Shoto and Izuku safe? So, he'd stay not a splatter on the sidewalk a little longer. He pulled out of his pants pocket, his new pack of smokes. He almost wished he had his hoodie. But Izuku still had it. He sort of felt guilty when he thought about the kid. He'd gotten him hooked on smoking, but he'd seemed so put out. It had been all he could think of to keep him from going insane. So Tuya had offered the kid a smoke. He'd taken to it like a fish to water. Honestly, getting yelled at by his father had been worth it for the brief moment of relief he'd been able to provide. Izuku was a nice person. He'd been dragging Tuya by the collar further and further away from the dark road he was sure his life would have to follow. He was almost grateful to the little brat. It certainly helped that the kid was adorable. Bright eyes, round cheeks, freckles, the works. If Tuya were about 15% more depraved, he might have done something about that. But that was a teenager. That was a line he wasn't interested in crossing. Though, it was certainly fun to tease him. He hadn't reached out to the kid since his father had come barging in, and yelling at him. Izuku did send him exactly one message much later that same Friday night. One that made him almost feel bad for telling on the kid. Narc. Tuya had gone and narked on the kid to his own father. But to be fair to him, Midoriya Hisashi was a scary dude. A scary dude with a fire quirk which despite appearances would in fact kill him. Ah well. He'd make it up to the kid somehow. He took a long drag of his cigarette, letting the tension slip from his shoulders a bit. He checked his phone. He was early to the meeting time. Who exactly he was meeting he wasn't sure. Someone had gotten his contact information and sent him a text message the day before, telling him to meet them at this building at this time. He had to admit he was curious. Though, he was mostly here to avoid meeting the rest of the league. Shigaraki had called a meeting of his own. Twice had gotten in contact with someone from the Yakuza. Tuya was not interested in that shit. So here he sat, smoke in hand, waiting for his mysterious new friend. It could be a trap, he mused as he blew out smoke. Ah well. If he dies, he dies. Just one of those days. Dabby of the League of Villains. The voice was behind him. It was youthful, and something about it sent a shiver down his spine. Tuya glanced over his shoulder at the newcomer. His chest felt tight. The pro-hero Hawks was standing on the building. His red wings were outstretched behind him. He gave Dabby a cocky smile. So it was a trap. Glad you could meet me. He winked. Tuya took another lazy drag of his cigarette, turning away from him. I won't come quietly, he said. Can I finish my smoke before I burn your fucking wings off? Hawks laughed. It was a nice laugh. Oh, no worries man, he said and walked over to him. He moved quietly. Interesting. But I'm not here to arrest you. He sat down next to him on the building's ledge. I was hoping we could chat. Did Hawks know he was a traitor? Midoriya Hisashi certainly had enough connections to get to Hawks, dating All Might and all. That didn't seem right though. About what? He asked. How did you get my number? Oh, that? With enough digging and money, you can get your hands on anything you know. Hawks laughed again, his wings fluttering behind them. As for what? Can I tell you a secret, Dabby? I have a feeling you're going to anyway, Tuya said with another lazy drag. Hawks leaned in to whisper. The ghost of his breath along the shell of his ear made the hair on Tuya's neck stand up. I hate being a hero. Now that's interesting. A smirk made its way to Tuya's face. Was this a genuine statement or some top quality acting to try and get into the league? He was fairly certain it was the latter. He knew Hawk's type. This guy was a goodie for life. He may play the suave lady killer with a dark side, but there's no fucking way this guy was serious. Did the commission put you up to infiltrating the League? He asked. Nothing like that, Hawks assured. I just really admire the League of Villains, is all. Now that All Might's retired, I'm starting to see the real holes in hero society. You're not the only ones either. Oh, so the League had competition, hey? I was hoping to learn more about you, Hawks added. I think we can be friends, Dabby. Tuya laughed. Friends, hey? He asked and finished his cigarette. He rubbed the butt out on Hawks' thigh, smearing the ash on his pants. I don't exactly do friends very well. But if Hawks is trying to be a double agent, maybe he could use him. But Tuya needed to vet him. Do you know Midoriya Hisashi? He asked him. That took Hawks by surprise. H-ha. Midoriya Hisashi. Quirk counselor. Works at UA. His hero name is White Dragon or something. Do you know him? Tuya asked, pulling a leg up onto the building and pulling it close to his chest, leaning his head onto his knee as he looked at Hawks through his white eyelashes. Well. Hawks blinked. You mean, the guy All Might is dating? Tuya smirked. That's the guy. I met him once. A few months ago when he took his provisional license exam through the commission, Hawks said didn't exactly get a chance to talk long. Just sort of interviewed him with some commission members. He seemed like a nice guy. Has a kid at UA or something. Why bring him up? Talk to him, Tuya said and pulled out another smoke. If you wanna be friends, I mean. Hawks was silent for a long moment. Okay, he said, I'll talk to Midoriya Hisashi. Slowly the pro got to his feet. Is it okay if I keep your number? He asked, a smirk sliding back onto his handsome features. Tuya looked up at him, a demure smile playing at his lips. Sure thing, pretty bird. But don't text me until you talk to him, okay? Tuya winked. Pink dusted Hawk's nose. Sure thing, hot stuff. I'll His wings gave a flutter. See you around. He took a step off the building and took flight. Tuya watched him until he was out of sight. What the fuck had that been? First of all, Hawks trying to infiltrate the League? What the fuck was the commission thinking? Why the hell would they trust the number 3 hero? Unless Hawks was being serious, but Tuya was about 90% sure he wasn't. But, then again, that 10% was why he sent Hawks to Midoriya Hisashi. That dude was a spooky motherfucker who could probably sniff out his intentions from a mile away. A perfect vetting process. If Hawks was trying to be a double agent, then well, Tuya could have some fun with that, being a double agent himself. It certainly helped that he was a very pretty bird. Shoto was suffering a most beautiful kind of torture. It was a Monday afternoon. He was on house arrest with Izuku. Beautiful Izuku, who was absolutely killing him. Shoto was doing the dishes from that morning, washing them slowly as he watched Izuku prance around. He swore he had to be doing it on purpose. A pair of yellow workout shorts. They were obscenely short. Maybe not obscene, but short enough that the tips of Izuku's fingers were longer than their length. A black t-shirt of Shoto's that was too big for either of them, so it was loose around the collar, exposing more of his neck and shoulders. And a pair of knee-height white tube socks, with 2 little red strips near the top. Izuku moved, singing under his breath to the Disney music playlist he'd insisted they listen to. He held a feather duster in one hand as he dusted the wall-length windows. Shoto watched him rise from the ground, floating up to the ceiling and dusting the entire thing. He came back down, landing daintily on his toes before twirling away to the living room area. He watched with great interest as Izuku dusted the table, the TV, before kicking off the ground to dust the ceiling fans. He landed in front of the couch. You okay, Shao-chan? He asked. Shoto jumped a little. You're very distracting, he said honestly. Flouncing around like that. He smiled softly. It's like you're trying to make this take longer. He giggled. I'm not flouncing, he said, but did fold his hands together in front of him, digging his toes into the wood under him. What about me is so distracting, Shao-chan? He asked and hopped over the couch, moving closer to the kitchen. Your clothes, he said, going back to washing the pots. What about my clothes? Shoto looked up at him. Izuku was now standing on the tile of the kitchen, still holding the feather duster. You're impossible, he said and flicked some of the water from his fingers into Izuku's face. His boyfriend giggled, which devolved into his little rabbit-like chirps. We're supposed to be on house arrest, and doing chores. Not seducing me with your short shorts and your boyfriend shirt. Izuku smirked, so it is working. I knew you were doing it on purpose. Izuku got behind him and wrapped his arms around his waist. Oh come on Shoto. He kissed his shoulder, just trying to keep my mind occupied. I'm pretty pissed to not be in class. What are they doing? What are they learning? They're not going to tell us what we're missing. It's only 3 days but... He sighed. Shoto nodded. I get it. He went back to washing his pot, letting Izuku stay draped around him. I failed the license exam, so this is just pushing me further and further back, he said. Izuku tightened his grip. It is what it is though. He sighed. I'll just take my punishment and put my nose to the grindstone. It's 10 weeks of extra classes. When does that start? Izuku asked softly. Saturday, he said, turning to face Izuku. I understand it's an all-day class, so we'll have less time together. Izuku smiled. Well, I dunno about you, but I'm just about done with my chores. His crooked fingers walked over Shoto's chest. How about we finish up and we do something fun today while everyone else is stuck in class? Make the most of the time we have. It's no use moping around when there's fun to be had. Shoto chuckled. What kind of fun did you have in mind? We can play some video games together, or build a pillow fort, because I bet you've never done that. We could blast some music really loud and dance. Izuku said, Here, I'll turn the music up. He let him go and walked over to the speaker they had playing the music. He bent down to turn it up. Shoto's eyes wandered to the bottom of his shorts, watching them rise up, just shy of exposing the bottom of his cute butt cheeks. The silly Disney music was turned up louder. Finish those dishes. Izuku commanded, snapping back up and turning to Shoto. I'm gonna fluff these pillows and fold all the throw blankets. You better be done by the time I am. He rolled his eyes, and went about washing the pots. He finished quickly, before turning to Izuku. He was folding up the last of the blankets. The garish pink one he was folding must belong to Ashido. He put it away and turned to Shoto. So, what are we doing, Bun? Shoto asked. I'm glad you asked, Shoto. He turned the music to a new song. Shoto vaguely recognized it. It was Once Upon a Dream from Sleeping Beauty, the first Disney movie they watched together. Izuku held up a hand to him, and beckoned him forward. Shoto smiled and took his hand. Might I have this dance, Shoto? He asked. Okay, he said. I don't know how to dance. Izuku smiled at him charmingly. Don't worry. I don't either, he said. He placed his other hand on Shoto's waist, and had Shoto rest a hand on his shoulder. Their hands had their fingers intertwined. Slowly, Izuku led them in a gentle sway with the music. Their steps were awkward, but it seemed to feel right with the music. Izuku smiled up at him. Hold on. I wanna try something, he said, and pulled Shoto close. Izuku's feet left the ground and he pulled Shoto up with him. He seemed to be using pull to keep Shoto up with him. Oh, Shoto said, looking down at the ground as they twirled in the air slightly. His heart beat loudly in his chest. Oh wow, Izuku. He whispered softly. This is... He looked back to Izuku. His green eyes sparkled at him. Izuku was floating up a little higher than Shoto, so he had to look up at him. He found. He didn't mind. You're gorgeous, he whispered. Izuku's face flushed darkly. Xiao-chan, you're the beautiful one, he whispered back. I think that all the time. It was the first thing I ever thought about you. He raised his eyebrows in surprise as they twirled in the air. What? Really? I thought you said you thought I was an asshole at first. He nodded. I did, but that wasn't my first thought. You started stretching next to me and I looked over and I thought, wow. That's the most attractive person I've ever seen. That can't be true, Shoto said. I'm not that good looking. Izuku, I have a scar that covers a good portion of my face. You're joking, right? Izuku asked Shoto. You're the most beautiful person I've ever laid my eyes on. Your face is so soft in its features. Your eyes are beautiful. I love your hair, he said softly. Your scar isn't ugly. I think your scar is beautiful. It can honestly pass as part of your quirk. But either way, I think it makes you look mysterious. Shoto chuckled. Mysterious, really? Says the guy who can steal quirks. He teased Izuku. You're too good for me. You're so handsome. His face turned pink as they began to float back down to the floor. Xiao-chan. He whispered. Xiaodo's feet touched the ground first, Izuku floating just above him. Xiaodo grabbed his waist and pulled him close. Izuku wrapped his legs around his waist and kissed him. He pulled back, you know. With me being weightless like this, I wonder how many positions we can do it in. Many very graphic images filled Xiaodo's mind. Not even all of them involved the use of float. More than a few pictured Izuku with rabbit ears. Did that make him a furry? His grip on Izuku tightened. Did we finish all our chores for the day? Izuku hummed in thought, untangling his legs, and instead kicking them up behind him in thought. Dusted, vacuumed, dishes, we'll have to do the trash once everyone gets back, but... He mentally went over their to-do list as well. Xiaodo was fairly certain they were done. And we have about 2 hours until everyone comes home, so Xiaodo ran for the elevator, still holding Izuku. Izuku stretched out his legs, curling his toes. He was naked aside from his socks. He felt relaxed, and for a lack of a better word, thoroughly fucked. Xiaodo was napping, using Izuku's chest as a pillow. His long red and white locks mixed into pink on his chest. Man. Sex is pretty great. They hadn't fallen into Izuku's weird quirk void this time. He wasn't sure if that was a relief or not. On the one hand, it was good. He really didn't want to risk accidentally having sex in front of the vestiges. He was pretty sure they weren't always watching, were they? On the other hand, that first time when it had just been him and Xiaodo and nothing else, well, he'd felt like he was melting from the inside out. No pleasure had ever been that deep, that intense. Not to say that this hadn't been extremely satisfying. Because it had been. He felt good, and full, and he wanted to smoke. Izuku briefly considered running down to his own dorm room, fishing out one of his last 2 cigarettes and smoking one. It would be heavenly. He kicked the thought from his mind. No, a post-orgasm smoke, while very good, was not worth it. He'd save them for when he really needed a smoke. So instead he lay there, playing with Xiaodo's hair, letting his mind wander. What were his classmates doing? What was Kikan doing? Was he sitting in his seat pretending he wasn't paying attention? What about Okako? Sitting in the back, doodling in the margins of her notebooks, knowing her. Ida? Taking very detailed notes. Shinsu, probably texting Kaminari under his desk, had to try extra hard without Izuku being there to help body block for him. Speaking of phones. Izuku leaned over to grab his from the charger. He frowned. It was that late already? The class would be getting back to the dorms in just a few minutes. He smiled down at Xiaodo and gently pulled himself out from under him. He grabbed his shorts and boyfriend shirt, getting himself redressed. It was a bit chilly out, so he grabbed the closest hoodie he could find. It happened to be his black one. He tossed that on and gathered the trash from Xiaodo's room. His own dorm didn't have any since he was never there. He carried the trash downstairs and started a pile. Seemed he was just in time as the doors swung open, his classmates all piling in. Jiro and Yaeorozu led the pack welcome home. Izuku called to them, waving, "I'm doing trash right now, so if you wouldn't mind bringing all your room trash down, I'll take it out," he said, placing his hands on his hips. "Wow, Midoriya, what are you wearing?" Jiro asked. "Smells like an ashtray." He looked down at his clothes. "Comfy clothes," he said defensively. "I literally just quit smoking. A bunch of my stuff smells like this." He sighed. "Just go get your trash." Yaeorozu glanced around as more students filed in. "It looks great in here. I guess you two were working pretty hard." She frowned. "Where is Todoroki-kun?" "Ah, he's napping. We finished up a little bit ago other than trash, so we decided to nap. I only just woke up about 10 minutes ago," Izuku explained. Shinso laughed, passing the girls, Kaminari on his heels. "Oh yeah, napping. That's what you two were up to," he teased. "You're literally in a boyfriend hoodie and short shorts, bud," he said. "You can't hide from us. We know what you were up to." Yaeorozu blushed deeply and covered her face. Jiro rolled her eyes and took her by the hand and led her away. "Yet, not staying for this conversation." "Shinso-kun, don't be rude," Izuku said, and stomped his foot on the ground. "So how was class?" "Wouldn't you like to know, weather boy?" Kaminari asked. "Not important." "You know what is important." "Oh god, not this." "Denki, anything but this." Izuku tilted his head in confusion as Kaminari whipped his phone. He quickly opened TikTok on his phone, scrolled to his profile, and picked one of his own videos. He pushed the phone into Izuku's hand. Take a look. He cried. Shinso facing away from the camera. The person holding the phone walked towards him. Hey, mind Jack. Kaminari's voice came through the speaker. You just got your provisional license, feels great right? He asked. Shinso turned around. Great? It's more than great, bucko. I'm on the top of the goddamn world. I'm high and my drug is life. I'm getting married, I'm the blushing bride and my groom is happiness. Charge bolt, I'm about one neuron shooting my brain up with serotonin away from doing a 45-minute air guitar solo. I get so save people, charge bolt. I get to save people while dressed up like a ninja. Do you know how freaking tight that is, pal? Friend, buddy, bucko, charge bolt. I'm a hero now. It's about to be baby's first rescue mission. Charge bolt. Shinso kept up the rambling, his face growing more and more deranged. I feel like puppies are licking my face 24/7. I feel like what Disneyland is. Charge bolt, my mom could die and this still might be the best day of my life. That's a lie. I love my mom, charge bolt. So, great? Kaminari asked. Yeah, great, sums it up pretty well, thanks buddy. Izuku laughed, it's pretty good. Kaminari shook his head. Look at the likes on it. Izuku looked back down at the video. Oh my, 2.5 million likes. He looked up at Kaminari with a slack jaw. I know right? Oh, showing Midoriya the TikTok? Zero asked, stopping by their little group. As they talked, a few people came and added their trash bags to the pile. It's doing some serious numbers. Yeah, man. We went viral. Kaminari cheered. Izuku grinned. That's great guys. Oh, that's so good for your exposures. Shinso-kun might be the only one whose face is in it, but him saying your hero name over and over is probably why the video is so funny. I know it's what I'll think of when I remember the video. So that's so cool. Millions of people are going to be saying your hero name. Kaminari's eyes widened. I didn't even think of that. Holy shit. Hitachi. Thank you. Shinso's face turned red as he rubbed the back of his neck. I mean, you're the one that took the video. So. Thank you too, Denki. Izuku and Zero shared a look, before they both chuckled. Well, I'm very happy for you guys. Maybe I should make one with Shouto. Where is Roki anyway? Zero asked. I was gonna show him a new manga series. We won't be able to go out on Saturday mornings anymore, so I thought I'd buy a few things in advance. Right, your manga thing. He smiled. Since moving into the dorms and becoming neighbors with Zero, he'd been taking Shouto to a local bookstore to show him some manga he missed as a kid. It started one morning when Zero and Kirishima were talking about One Piece when Shouto revealed he'd never read a manga. Zero had taken this as a personal challenge to educate Shouto. Izuku thought it was sweet, and was glad someone else was helping Shouto heal his inner child. He's just sleeping. We finished early and took a nap. He means they fucked, Shinso said with a grin. Oh good, Zero said with a smile, I get to go to bed early tonight. Izuku's entire face burned red. Wait, what? He asked. Zero laughed. Dude. I live right next to you. The walls are thick but they are not that thick. He laughed harder as Izuku's face contorted into horror. Stop, it's not as bad as you think, I can't always make out words and it's easy to tune out with headphones. Just, go get your trash please so I can take it with me when I just throw myself away, Izuku whispered. The three of them all laughed and went to fetch their garbage. He started making trips as soon as he had a respectable amount of trash bags. He carried them the short walk from the 1A dorms to the dumpster. We really need to start being more quiet, Izuku mumbled. I do not need fucking Zero to hear what Shouto sounds like when he see you. He stopped. There was a face sticking out of the wall next to him. He turned to look only for the face he'd seen from the corner of his eye vanish. With more hesitancy he took a step forward, now glancing around. What was that? Where had he come from? Ha ha ha, a cheery voice laughed. Izuku's eyes widened in horror as he slowly looked down. There at his feet, was a face. Bright blue eyes and a wide smile. Trash, am I right? The face asked before sinking back into the ground. What the fuck? Chapter 55, What if he doesn't like me? Chapter by Roxi2Star. Tuesday. Kigo was having a hard time wrapping his head around this. Why was All Might's boyfriend wrapped up with someone from the League of Villains? He hadn't reported to the commission about this yet. If they thought for even a second that someone that close to All Might might be a traitor, he'd be carted off to prison, just for the safety of the number one. But they'd been living together for months. Even Kigo knew that. In all the paparazzi pictures, All Might and Midoriya Hisashi seemed happy as can be. It just didn't seem possible that this Midoriya guy was a villain. He even worked at UA. Which is why Kigo was standing in front of an office door reading Midoriya and wearing a shiny visitor's pass. Not hard to obtain, being the number 3 hero and all. He looked down at the nameplate before looking back to the door. Should he knock? Probably. Kigo lifted his hand and gently rapped his knuckles on the wood. It's open. A deep, but pleasant voice called. He opened the door. Midoriya was sitting at his desk, typing away at his computer, a large file open on his desk. How can I? Oh my. He looked up, meeting Kigo's eye. He took a minute to really look at the guy and size him up. He hadn't looked too deeply the time they'd briefly met. Midoriya was a moderately tall guy, certainly taller than Kigo, but that's not exactly hard to do. His neat head of white hair and pale skin give him a sort of ethereal look, like light might be able to pass through him. Glittering red eyes are certainly not rare, but definitely suit this man. Plus the freckles. Kigo's always liked freckles. Overall, the guy was a DILF. He can see how he managed to snag All Might's heart. Hey Midoriya, he said with a grin, I was hoping you had a few minutes to talk? Privately. Midoriya's face twitched. Here is fine, he said. Please, take a seat Hawks, he said and motioned for one of the green chairs in front of him. Kigo smiled again and plopped into one, his wings folding up comfortably. So, any particular reason the number 3 hero is knocking on my office door? I hope I'm not in trouble with the commission. My real license exam isn't until January. Right, the guy only technically had his provisional. Hard to remember that when he helped All Might take on that spooky all-for-one guy back in the summer. No, nothing like that, Kigo said with a laugh. I'm here for another reason. He continued, I recently learned we have a mutual friend. That seemed to get Midoriya's attention. He leaned in closer. He pointed me in your direction. Midoriya smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. You're keeping me in suspense here, Hawks. Who's our mutual friend? Kigo glanced around the room before standing and leaning over the desk. He got down to whisper into Midoriya's ear, Dabi. When he pulled back, Midoriya's face was unreadable. Finally, his mask broke. The smile slipped from his face, his eyes hardened. He pinched the bridge of his nose. That kid is going to give me a fucking stroke, he said. Not quite the reaction Kigo was expecting. But are you trying to infiltrate the league? He asked. Course you are. So you picked Dabi as your way in. Why? Because he's close to you in age, or was he just the first one you could get a hold of? Midoriya drummed his finger on the desk. You lucked out by picking him. What? Kigo asked. Midoriya was surprising. Quick on the uptake. But it confirmed that he was working with Dabi. Maybe the entire league. Holy shit, All Might was dating a villain. I said you got lucky. Dabi isn't loyal to the league. He's what? Kigo coughed a few times. Dabi's not loyal to the league? Wait, are you saying he's a double agent? Wait. Did that mean Midoriya wasn't a villain then? He's confused. I'm saying he's not exactly loyal to the league. I wouldn't call him a double agent since he won't tell me where their base of operations is, or exactly what they're planning. So far he's only spoken to Izuku about a handful of things, and even then it's the bare minimum since he's trying to keep him safe. Midoriya explained. That was a lot of information. Information that just gave him more questions. Wait. Kigo said, trying to figure out what his next line of questions should be. You're not a traitor to heroes, Dabi is a traitor to the villains. I have that right? Obviously, Midoriya said, and you're trying to infiltrate the league, probably because that's what the commission wants you to do. Like I said, you're lucky that you ran into Dabi first. He might be willing to help you. He's implied he eventually wants to see the league dismantled but just needs them for his own purposes. He paused. You're pretty easy to read. Had Dabi not been a traitor, I'm pretty sure he'd have seen right through you. Kigo was very hard to read. He had years of training to be hard to read, and here's this school counselor reading him like a fucking kid's book. Okay, who's Izuku? He asked. My son. Oh, that made sense. Kigo tried to remember everything he could. He'd read the small file that had been put together about Midoriya Hisashi. It did mention he had a son at UA. A first year. Midoriya Izuku, right. The one who'd been kidnapped this summer. Idiot Kigo, not realizing they were one and the same. Made sense that the kid had a connection to Dabi then. They'd met when they'd taken the kid. Did Dabi have something to do with them defeating All for One? What else did he know about the kid? He'd done great at the sports festival until he and Endeavor's son had their massive fight that had destroyed half the stadium. The kid had a strong quirk and a quick mind. Kigo had considered sending an invite for an internship his way, now that he remembered who he was. He was a 1A kid and they certainly had his attention, being the ones who first encountered the League of Villains. It seemed Midoriya Izuku was someone it would pay to know. Though perhaps he should be more subtle about getting to know the Class 1A kids. I see, Kigo said, so you know Dabi because he knows your son? And Dabi is a double agent-ish. Because he has a soft spot. For your son. He leaned forward in the chair. Do I have that right? Wait, does All Might know about this? All Might is my boyfriend. Of course, he does. He's involved in all the decisions regarding Izuku, Midoriya said. So. What's your plan? You make contact with Dabi, join the league, and take them out from the inside. He asked. Kigo shrugged. I mean. That's the long and short of it. You'll have to earn their trust. They might want you to do something fucked up. Oh, and didn't Kigo know that? His eyes darkened. I'm aware of the sacrifices I'll have to make, he said simply. He hummed. So. Let me ask you a question, I'd love your opinion. Why did Dabi send you to me? He shrugged. No clue. You'll have to ask him that. Midoriya's cell phone buzzed on the table. Kigo eyed it, reading the notification. A text from Izu. So Izuku. Midoriya picked it up. One moment, sorry Hawks, he said and read the message. Well, look at that. He smiled. Seems Dabi wants to meet up this evening. He stood from his desk. I'm sorry to cut the meeting short. He fished out a business card and tossed it to Kigo. Stay in touch, I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot to talk about sometime. You seem like a nice guy, Hawks. If you wanna stop the league, we're in the same boat. Let's be friends. Kigo chuckled, but he got an odd sinking feeling in his gut. I don't get a choice in that, now do I? Midoriya only smiled. Was it sneaking out if he had his father's permission? Izuku wasn't sure. It did feel slightly illegal as he and Shoto made their way down to the common room. It was past curfew. They walked together in silence to wait on the dorm's front steps for his father to come and pick them up. It had started earlier that day. Izuku and Shoto had been cleaning again when Izuku's phone had gone off. He checked it while dusting, and opened the new text message from Tuya. It had read, "Hey baby girl, can I come over after you get out of school? It's been a rough day and Daddy needs to unwind. Daddy's sorry for being too rough with you last time. Can I please come over, baby? Maybe you should bring your friends." Tuya had information. Probably nothing good based on the contents of the message. Izuku and Dad had agreed to go after curfew since they couldn't think of a plausible reason to break house arrest without arousing suspicion. Better to just sneak out while everyone was in bed. It wasn't like they had school in the morning, so Izuku and Shoto could manage being out late. They sat together on the front steps, Izuku in an All Might varsity-style jacket. Shoto was wearing a simple black turtleneck, his hair held up in a small bun. Izuku held to his black stoner hoodie in his hands. He was returning it. As much as he didn't want to. He'd grown rather fond of it and its smoky smell. "How are you feeling?" Izuku asked Shoto. "Nervous," Shoto admitted. Izuku looked up at him. "You don't need to be. Tuya is a really cool guy. He took Shoto's hand. He's nice, and he's not going to hurt us. If he wanted to do that, he would have by now." "What if he doesn't like me?" Shoto asked softly. "We haven't exactly talked. He has my number but we don't talk." "Oh. Shoto." Izuku squeezed his hand. "Don't worry. Tuya is going to love you. He talks about you very fondly. And I know he worries about you too. You're his baby brother, there's no way he won't like you." Shoto smiled at him. "Thanks, Bun," he said softly. "Good, you're ready," Dad said, coming down the path towards them. "Come on kiddos, the car is waiting," he said and motioned for them to follow. Izuku and Shoto stood, following Dad back to the truck. Izuku always felt at ease coming home. There was something about watching his father unlock the front door for him that made him feel like he was 10. Dad opened the door and they followed him inside. Tuya was inside waiting already. He sat on the couch, face in his hands. He was just wearing his t-shirt and jeans. He wasn't crying, but the hunch in his shoulders, the slight hitch in his breath. Something had happened. Dad crept along. Dabby, are you okay? He asked. I'm fine, he said simply. Slowly he sat up and turned to look over at them. His eyes looked tired. Hey Xiao, he said with a small smile. Tuya, Xiaodou said gently. Xiaodou moved forward first and sat on the same couch as Tuya but a few feet away. Izuku and Dad both moved into the living room sitting on the other couch. Tuya looked up. It's been a fucking week. Xiaodou frowned. It's only Tuesday. I'm aware, Tuya said rubbing his temple. I have a lot of news. He began. Let's get that out of the way before anything else. The League made contact with the Shihasai Kai. They had a meeting with Chisaki Kai. He paused for a reaction. Izuku had never heard of the group, or this Chisaki guy. Dad seemed to understand though. He frowned. I wasn't there for it, but it didn't go well. He bit the inside of his cheek. That bastard took one of Compress arms and murdered Magni. Izuku gasped. Oh, that's awful, he said softly. Poor Magni. Xiaodou frowned. Isn't that one with the big magnet that bashed your head in? He frowned. Yes, technically. But that still doesn't mean she deserved to die. She was a villain, yes, but that doesn't mean she should be put to death. She deserved to go to trial and face a fair punishment. And I feel bad for Compress too. Mutilation like that. Izuku squeezed his own arm. The one that had been broken for 2 days in Kamino. It's terrible. She was always kind to me, Tuya said. She was everyone's big sister. Himiko has been crying about it non-stop. I should have been there. He shook his head. It's whatever, it does. And Xiaodou cut him off by laying a hand on Tuya's arm. What the fuck are you doing? Comforting you, Xiaodou said. Is it working? Tuya laughed and rolled his eyes. Yeah sure, pest. He let Xiaodou keep his hand on his arm. Shigaraki wants to fuck the Shihasai Kai over. Now that's interesting, Dad said. Could be useful. Getting two troublesome groups to turn on each other. Maybe they'll take each other out. Unlikely, Tuya said. Shigaraki is trying to be methodical about this. He's been holed up somewhere scheming. He's smarter than I think people give him credit for. He planned the whole summer camp heist and not for nothing it worked pretty damn well. Sorry Izuku. Izuku frowned. It's fine, he assured. You're not wrong. It did go well for the League. It's an okay example to use. At any rate, Tuya continued, they had something. Can't say what, but something Shigaraki wants. That's his plan. Fuck over the Yakuza and steal their shit. That's really all I have as an update. Dad shook his head. No, Dabby, this is huge, he said and stood. Dad began to pace. I'm going to do some research if any hero agencies are working on the Hasaikai. They've been making a lot of moves, so at least one agency has to be. I'll try and pass that information along to them. He turned back to Tuya. I have an update as well actually. Hawks stopped by my office this morning. What? Izuku asked. The number 3? That Hawks? Tuya only smirked. And what did you make of him? Ah. That's why you sent him to me, Dad said. Yet, he's on a mission from the Heroes Commission. No doubt about it. There's no way that guy is a villain. We can trust him. I've got an eye for that sort of thing. I've lived long enough to tell. Mostly. Thanks for that. I'll wait for him to reach back out then. I think he'll be pretty useful, Tuya said before turning to Xiaodou. So, with all that settled, how did your big exam go? Izuku was freaking the fuck out over it. Xiaodou frowned. Izuku passed. I failed. Oof, Tuya said and in turn gave Xiaodou's arm an awkward pat. I can't imagine the asshole took that well. Xiaodou shook his head. It'll be fine. They'll let you retake it, right? He nodded. Then don't worry. You'll be fucking fine. Just don't fail next time, stupid. Tuya said, I want a smoke. I'm going outside. See, can I come? Xiaodou asked in a small voice. Tuya rolled his eyes. Yeah, come on pest. He motioned for Xiaodou to follow. The two of them slipped outside, the door closing behind them. Izuku felt itchy. He wanted a smoke so badly. He sighed softly, crossing his arms over his chest. He was still holding to his jacket. He leaned in and took a long inhale, getting the faint traces of cigarette smoke. Dad watched him. He put the jacket down. Sorry. Izuku mumbled, just knowing he's out there smoking is kind of making it hard to think. I really want one. Dad sighed and sat down next to him again, throwing an arm around him. Do you think it will do more damage, or do you think it will help? He asked. I dunno. Izuku said softly. I want to say it'll help. Push my craving back a bit, but it might just make me want to smoke more after. I really don't know, but I know it hurts, he said. It's only day 4 and I want to break and smoke so bad. I almost smoked the 2 you left me, but I keep telling myself I should wait for something awful to happen. Something awful? Izuku nodded and brought his legs up to his chest. Yet. You know. When in the next few weeks something horrible inevitably happens, I want to have a cigarette so I can deal with it. He leaned his face into his knees. I know it's not the healthiest vice, but I really liked smoking, he confessed. It just made me feel better. Dad rubbed a warm hand over his back. I know, Izuku, he said softly. But we'll find other ways to make you feel better. I'll get you that therapy appointment and I can buy you nicotine patches. He rubbed in smooth circles. I know this is really hard. I've been there. I've smoked on and off since I was your age. And keep in mind that was 200 years ago. He laughed. I haven't smoked since your mom died. Really? Izuku asked. I didn't know you were smoking back then. Dad nodded. I was pretty sneaky, he said with a chuckle. Your mom knew. She hated that I smoked. Used to toss my cigarettes out if she found them. Izuku smiled as well. That did sound like Mom. But I quit cold turkey after she died. Just couldn't bring myself to do it. If you managed to do it, I can too, Izuku said. They sat in silence for a few moments before Izuku asked, what do you think they're talking about? Could be anything. Catching up, school, family problems, he listed. I think it's good they're talking though. Brothers are important. I'd love to spend time with Yoichi again. Izuku looked up at his father. I mean, maybe someday you can. He said. He's, at least something of him, is in my quirk. He pulled at Tuya's jacket in his lap. I can try to see if I can reach the vestiges. Maybe someday I'll be able to talk to them like a person. If that happens, you and Uncle Yoichi can talk, at least through me. And Toshinori can talk to Nana. I know he misses her. He frowned. I just don't know how. Dad hummed in thought. I think it's sweet that you want to reach out to them. Maybe just think about what happened every time you spoke to them. See if you can't get a repeat. Before Izuku could respond, the door burst back open. Tuya strolled back, laughing loudly. Man, good for Natsu, he said, telling him to go fuck himself. I've never been prouder. Shoto followed behind, smiling softly. Yeah, Endeavor wasn't exactly surprised, but what can you do? I wish I had Izuku's talent for making him shut up. What, so he can't offer you more condoms? Shoto groaned. Don't ever speak about that again. The most humiliating, he sighed. Dad chuckled and checked his watch. Well, Dabby, was there anything else? It's getting late. Even though these kids don't have school in the morning, they should probably be in their beds before 3 am. He stood. Nah, that's all I got, Tuya said. Man, I'm exhausted. This week has been fucking terrible. He fell back onto the couch. Shoto frowned and leaned down next to him. What, pest? Do you need more money? I do have some cash with me. Tuya shook his head. I'm good. But thanks for worrying about your big brother. I still have most of what Izuku gave me. Hasn't even been a week since you had your boyfriend deliver me that last stack. Should last a month if I'm good. Okay, Shoto said. If you run out, just text me. We'll get it to you. Please eat better too, you're very thin. Jesus Christ, okay, I'll eat more. Thanks, Mom. Tuya gave him a half-hearted glare. Anything else you want to nag me about while you're at it? I mean... Shoto began before Tuya shoved a hand into his face, cutting him off. Just go home. I'll text you if I need anything, I promise, okay? He said before moving his hand from Shoto's face and instead into his hair, ruffling up his bangs. Pest. Go home. I wanna sleep. Izuku rolled up next to Shoto and dropped the jacket over Tuya. Here's your hoodie back. Thanks for letting me borrow it. Tuya waved them off. Yeah. Go home, seriously. I'll message you if anything happens. And I'll talk to Hawks. See what he can do for me. Now leave. He pointed to the door. I haven't slept in like 2 days and I need it. They bid him goodbye. Izuku noticed Tuya was out cold before they even left the apartment. Wednesday passed in a blur. Izuku and Shoto spent their last day of house arrest getting all the chores done in full, as well as their own personal chores. Their dorm room was cleaned, and all their laundry done. Both of them are eager to get to school the next day and get back in the classroom. They were sure they'd have work to catch up on, but their classmates had been pretty stern on the whole, not telling them anything. Though Izuku had heard the word work-study get thrown around. He'd heard the term a few times. As he understood it, it was a sort of more intense version of internships. Like a part-time job at a hero agency. The thought alone made him practically vibrate in bed with excitement. Shoto lay next to him, still reading his book. He turned his head. Izuku, you should get some sleep. We have to actually be up for school tomorrow. I know, Izuku mumbled and turned towards his boyfriend. He kicked a leg between Shoto's before wrapping his arms around him, trapping him in his grip. I'm just so excited. I can't wait to be back in the classroom. He laid his head on Shoto's shoulder. We missed so much in such a short time. I just want to keep moving. I hate doing nothing. Shoto closed his book and laid it on his bedside table. He adjusted himself to cuddle Izuku closer. I know. We'll be okay. We're smart, we can catch up. Plus, you'll probably be able to do these work studies. I don't have my license, so I'm out. He pressed his face further into his neck. You'll get it. 10 weeks. That's nothing. You'll have it by the end of November. Izuku kissed his jaw. Then you'll be all caught up to us. I mean, if anyone can do it, you can, Xiao-chan. His arms tightened around him. How did I get so lucky to have you? Shoto asked, his voice turning soft and husky. Well, I'm an emotionally available risk-taker. That's how, he teased. Plus you're so pretty. So pretty, Shoto. Not to mention how kind you are, and how funny you are. The more Izuku talked, the pinker Shoto's face became. Cute, he mumbled, trailing off and kissed his boyfriend properly. Come on, let's go to bed. We have school tomorrow. Shoto grumbled. Fine. He just pulled Izuku closer and forced his eyes closed. Izuku chuckled and squeezed back tightly, letting his eyes close as well. They were out in just a few minutes. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.